We live in a time where information is everywhere. You can learn anything at any moment from anyone. How to build discipline, how to start a business, how to become confident, how to change your life. And every time you consume something useful, you feel a small shift inside, a sense of clarity, a sense of direction, sometimes even motivation. It feels like progress, but nothing in your life has actually moved. Your habits are the same, your routines are the same, your results are the same. Yet internally, it feels like you did something important. This is the illusion. Information creates the emotional experience of growth. You watch a powerful video and feel transformed. You read a strong idea and feel wiser. You understand the concept and feel ahead. But understanding is not movement. It is possible to spend years learning how to change without ever changing, because knowledge is safe. It doesn't require risk. It doesn't expose you to failure. It doesn't demand action. It only asks you to listen, and listening feels productive. That's the subtle trap. You begin to confuse mental activity with real-world progress. You mistake clarity for courage, insight for implementation, inspiration for transformation. But your life only responds to behavior, not to thoughts, not to plans, not to understanding. Results respond to action, and until something in your behavior shifts, nothing outside of you will shift either. Information gives you the feeling of movement, but feelings are not results. And that is where most people quietly get stuck. There is a reason knowing feels so satisfying. When you encounter a new idea, especially one that promises improvement, your brain rewards you. You feel stimulated, engaged, slightly elevated, as if something meaningful just happened. And biologically, something did happen. You received a small hit of dopamine, the same chemical associated with reward and anticipation. Learning feels good because it signals potential progress. Your brain interprets new knowledge as a step towards survival, growth, or status. It doesn't distinguish between preparing for action and actually taking action. To your nervous system, both can feel similar. That's where the trap begins. You watch a video about discipline and you feel disciplined. You read about confidence and you feel more confident. You listen to someone explain success and you momentarily feel closer to it. But you haven't stepped into discomfort. You haven't risked failure. You haven't faced uncertainty. You've only consumed information. Action is different. Action is uncomfortable. It exposes you. It creates the possibility of embarrassment, rejection, or loss. It requires energy. And your brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid threat. So it quietly prefers learning about change over going through change. Consuming information gives you the reward without the risk, the emotional payoff without the vulnerability, the sensation of growth without the friction of transformation. And if you repeat this cycle often enough, your mind starts to believe you are evolving, when in reality, you are only accumulating concepts. The more you learn, the more capable you feel. But capability that is never tested becomes theoretical. It lives only in imagination. This is why someone can know exactly what to do and still not do it. The barrier is not ignorance, it is discomfort. And the mind will almost always choose the easier reward. Understanding something is mentally stimulating. Practicing it is mentally and emotionally demanding. That is the difference. And that is why knowing by itself is never enough. Knowing is safe because it does not threaten who you are. You can learn about discipline and still remain undisciplined. You can study confidence and still avoid difficult conversations. You can understand how to build a business and still never launch one. Knowledge allows you to expand your mind without disturbing your identity. Action is different. The moment you act, you are no longer observing change. You are participating in it. and participation forces a shift in identity. When you consistently wake up early, you are no longer someone who wants to be disciplined, you are becoming disciplined. When you start speaking up despite fear, you are no longer someone who studies confidence, you are becoming confident. And identity shifts are uncomfortable because identity is stability. It is the internal story you tell about who you are. It creates predictability. It protects the ego, and the ego resists anything that threatens its current structure, even if that structure is limiting. Remaining the same is familiar. Becoming someone new is uncertain. When you act in a new way, you step outside the boundaries of your current self-image. You enter a space where you cannot fully predict how you will perform, how others will respond, or how you will feel. That uncertainty creates tension, so the mind prefers to stay in the realm of understanding. There, you can imagine a better version of yourself without risking the discomfort of becoming that person. But real change is not an intellectual upgrade. It is an identity reconstruction. You don't change your life by collecting new ideas. You change your life by repeatedly behaving in ways that redefine who you believe you are. And that process is slow. It is quiet. It is often invisible at first. But with each repeated action, the old identity weakens and the new one strengthens. That is why knowing something rarely feels threatening, but acting on it does. Because action asks a deeper question than knowledge ever will. Not, do you understand this? But, are you willing to become someone who lives this? There is a quiet gap between understanding something and embodying it, and most people live in that gap for years. You can understand that sleep is important and still go to bed late. You can understand that exercise improves your mood and still avoid training. You can understand that certain relationships are unhealthy and still remain in them. The knowledge is clear, the logic is solid, the evidence is there, but your behavior does not follow. This is because understanding lives in the mind, while embodiment lives in the nervous system. One is intellectual, the other is behavioral. And behavior is shaped not by what you know, but by what you repeatedly practice. A truth does not change you the moment you agree with it. It changes you the moment it becomes your default action. There are levels to growth. First, you receive information. Then, you intellectually understand it. But there is a third level, the level where the idea becomes automatic, where you no longer debate it, where you no longer need motivation to apply it, where it simply becomes how you operate. That is embodiment. Embodiment is when discipline is no longer a concept you admire, but a standard you live by. When honesty is no longer something you value in theory, but something you practice even when it costs you. When boundaries are no longer something you read about, but something you calmly enforce. Most people stop at understanding because it feels complete. It feels like closure. You heard the idea, you agree with it, you can explain it to someone else. And that creates the illusion that the work is done. But the real work begins after understanding. Between knowing and becoming, there is repetition. There is friction. There are days when you do not feel aligned with the truth you claim to believe, and yet you choose to act according to it anyway. That is where transformation happens. Not when you understand something once, but when you live it often enough that it reshapes your baseline. Until then, the idea remains external. It is something you possess, not something you are. And life only changes when what you know becomes who you are. If knowing is not enough, then why do we keep returning to it? Why do we continue reading, watching, listening, collecting insights, even when our lives remain the same? Because staying in the learning phase feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels productive. No one criticizes you for trying to improve yourself. In fact, it is socially rewarded. You can talk about the books you read, the podcasts you follow, the ideas you're exploring. It creates the image of growth. And image is easier than change. Learning gives you structure without disruption. It allows you to remain in preparation mode. And preparation mode feels safe, because you can always say, "I'm not there yet, I'm still learning." That sentence protects you from exposure. As long as you are preparing, you are not being judged by real results. You are not risking visible failure. You are not confronting the possibility that effort might not immediately pay off. The learning loop becomes a subtle form of avoidance. You consume insight. You feel inspired. You imagine a better version of yourself. But imagination requires no courage. It only requires attention. Then, when the discomfort of action appears, you return to learning again. Another video, another article, another strategy. It feels like forward movement, but it is circular. Learn, feel motivated, do nothing, learn again. Over time, this cycle becomes comfortable. You start to identify as someone who is working on themselves, while the actual patterns in your life remain untouched. And the deeper reason is rarely laziness. It is fear. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of failure. Fear of discovering that change is harder than it sounded. So the mind chooses the controlled environment of information over the unpredictable reality of action. But self-improvement, when it stays theoretical, becomes entertainment. It stimulates you. It occupies you. It makes you feel engaged with your potential. Yet potential that is never tested slowly turns into frustration. And eventually, you are left with a strange tension. You know so much, and yet nothing feels different. That tension is the cost of staying in the loop. If knowing is not enough, then what is? The shift begins when you stop asking, "What else do I need to learn?" and start asking, "What am I willing to practice?" Because practice is where ideas lose their comfort and gain their power. Change does not happen in moments of insight. It happens in moments of repetition. Small, often invisible repetitions that feel insignificant at first. Waking up when you said you would. Finishing what you started. Saying no when it would be easier to say yes. Speaking honestly when silence would protect you. None of these actions feel dramatic. None of them feel life-changing in the moment. But identity is not shaped by intensity. It is shaped by consistency. You do not rise to the level of what you know. You fall to the level of what you practice. What you practice becomes automatic. What becomes automatic becomes your standard. And your standards shape your life. The mind looks for breakthroughs, but life responds to patterns. A single inspired day changes nothing. A repeated behavior changes everything. And this is where responsibility becomes simple, but not easy. You already know enough. You know what would improve your health. You know what would strengthen your relationships. You know what would move your work forward. The gap is rarely informational. It is behavioral. So the real question is not whether you understand the principle. The real question is whether you are willing to tolerate the boredom of repetition, the discomfort of inconsistency at the beginning, the temporary feeling of being inexperienced in a new identity. Because practice feels ordinary. It does not feel profound. It does not feel cinematic. It feels quiet. It feels disciplined. It often feels inconvenient. But over time, it becomes you. And when a behavior becomes part of who you are, it no longer requires willpower. It becomes natural. That is when life begins to shift. Not when you learn one more idea, but when you choose one idea and leave it long enough for it to rewrite you. At some point, you realize that the distance between the life you imagine and the life you live is not a lack of knowledge, it is a lack of embodiment. You already know what matters. You already know the habits that would move you forward. You already know the conversations you've been postponing, the risks you've been avoiding, the standards you've been lowering. The question is no longer, what should I learn next? The question becomes, what am I ready to live? Because knowing changes your mind, living changes your life. Understanding something once can feel powerful, but living it daily is what makes it real. Insight creates possibility, practice creates identity, and identity creates outcomes. So the next time you feel inspired by an idea, pause for a moment. Don't ask yourself whether you agree with it. Don't ask whether it makes sense. Ask something quieter. Am I willing to act on this, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one sees it, even when I don't feel motivated? That is where change begins. Not in the moment of realization, but in the moment of repetition. You don't need more information. You need more implementation. And the shift is simple. Choose less to learn. Choose more to practice. Because in the end, your life will not reflect what you knew. It will reflect what you did.